last week, we had a very dramatic change of policy by the Federal Reserve. So I've written a piece about that, which was available yesterday, which I say Jay Powell is taking not just a baseball bat, but a long handle to attack inflation. What he said is that they're going to bring an end to quantitative easing by March next year, and then after that we have the guidance of the summary of economic projections. Now, what is the summary of economic projections? Well, the summary of economic projections is the expectations of growth and inflation and the Fed funds rate that is put together not just by the governors of the Federal Reserve that work in the Myron Scholes building in Constitution Avenue in DC, but in addition to that, all of the presidents of all of the Federal Reserve banks, whether they are sitting on the Open Market Committee or not. So that means that the entire Federal Reserve system and all of the economists, all of the forecasting power of that whole system is captured in this summary of economic projections. And what it shows is that after bringing an end to quantitative easing in March, there is going to be a steady and regular increase in the Fed funds rate. And that steady and regular increase in the Fed funds rate means that we think that the first Fed rate hike will be 25 basis points, and it will be in June next year. And that will be followed by the same again in September and the same again in December. The projections suggest another 2 rate hikes the year after that, and another and more rate hikes the year after that. And so by the time we get to 2025, we've got the Fed funds rate rising from 0.1% now to 2.5%, which is where they think the long-term average is going to be. And the result of that is that they think that out in 25, which is a long way to forecast believable economic projections, growth will slow to 1.8%, which is the longer-term growth rate. And where that comes from is, where's that 1.8% come from? That's a combination of the growth in the labour force, the number of people coming into the labour force each year, plus productivity growth. That's where you get that 1.8% growth rate. And they think that at the end of this cycle, unemployment will be about 3.5%, which is, and actually they expect unemployment's going to hit 3.5% next year and be 3.5% the year after that and the year after that. Now, why that's remarkable is that we saw in 2019 US unemployment at 3.5%, and that was the first time it had been that low since 1968. And what was happening back in 1968 was that low level of unemployment was generating quite significant real wages growth. So we think that what we see from next year on is we see low unemployment and wages growing faster than inflation, living standards generally rising. Now, what's interesting about inflation over that period is that you would think that would generate cost-push inflation, but the Fed is so confident that they're ahead of the game in terms of inflation that they think inflation is going to fall, and they think that the PCE deflator runs about 0.5% behind the CPI. So they've estimated the PCE deflator for this year will be 5.3%. Now that's around about the same as a CPI of about 5.8%. And they think that the PCE will fall to 2.6% next year. Again, that's like CPI of 3.1, and 2.3% the year after that, like 2.8% CPI. Year after that, which is 24, they think the PCE will decline to 2.1%. Again, that's about 2.6% on the CPI. And eventually, in the longer run, the PCE in 25 falls to 2%, which is 2.5% on the CPI, which is exactly the same as our inflation target in Australia. So our inflation target in Australia between 2 and 3%, which means 2.5% on the CPI, is exactly the same as their target of 2% on the PCE. So, as I've said in the piece, if they achieve all these things that they expect to achieve in the summary of economic projections by this gradual increase of interest rates, they will bring inflation right down to target exactly in time for the next presidential election. I think that the possibility that they actually do that is, I think it's a delightful illusion. We just don't know what's going to happen that far out. But what we do know is that the Fed has changed very dramatically and very quickly to taking inflation very seriously. And we have a long-term period of tightening monetary policy in the US, starting with the end of QE before Easter next year. And that's the end of my comment to say this is my last presentation for the year. Merry Christmas to you all, and God bless us everyone.